After review,
It's 12.
Michigan State had 12 players on the field when the ball was snapped. Wow. That's a foul for illegal substitution. 5-yard penalty. Replay, 4th down.
Got to do it again. 47 rather than 42. He hooked it. Arizona State wins it.
Yeah, we're looking to go out there and make a statement. It's as simple as that.
Welcome into episode 4 of Hail to the Podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Justice of the WolverineLounge.com. This podcast is brought to you by Big Heads Media and presented to you by the Wolverine Lounge. Joined by me, as always, is my co-host, Daniel Dash. My friend, how are you?
We're doing well. How are you?
Hey, man. Bye week's over. On back to football.
Michigan football is back.
Yeah, definitely. And it's a big one. I mean, no other way to go back from a bye week than into a road environment like Wisconsin at Camp Randall. Michigan plays the Badgers this week, two teams that are presumed to be top 15, top 20, definitely top 25, but top 15, top 10-esque teams, two top-flight defenses. Obviously, Wisconsin has something Michigan doesn't in a Heisman and hype-type player in Jonathan Taylor. Michigan could have one surface by the end of the year, but at this juncture, the biggest issue is the offense, so you can't really say anyone's got any sort of Heisman hype whatsoever. So we're going to break down that game later, but we're going to start off with a bag of questions that we got from Twitter. Nice little mailbag for you guys. From there, we'll go to Hail to the Spread per usual. We'll break down Eyes on the Enemy with Daniel, and he'll tell us all about the Badgers. And then we will have our picks for Saturday at noon, the big noon kickoff on Fox, as they call it. Something interesting where they decided that their most important primetime game was going to be played before the crack of dawn for the people out west. So it's a good thing there's no Michigan fans in California, right?
Not at all.
Oh, wait, there's a lot. So feel bad for those guys. But let's hop into it with our mailbag questions. First off, if you guys follow us on Twitter, you can find us at Wolverine Lounge. And you're able to ask us some questions, and I don't think you guys really care about the pageantry of getting featured on the show, but at the very least you get your questions answered. So we'll start off here with our first one. This one's from Nate Wiggins, a member of the Wolverine Lounge, writes about recruiting in his free time. Speaking of West Coast Michigan fans, he's a San Diego native. So sorry, Nate, you're going to have to be up at 8:30 on Saturday.
Let's set that alarm.
Get a nice little 30-minute preparedness for this game. He asked me two questions. First one was a little bit off topic, and we'll get to that one in a minute here. The second one was, are Michigan fans, do they have too high expectations of this program, always expecting a college football playoff and a Big Ten championship year in and year out? And I'll let you start with this one.
You know, I don't think so. I don't think anybody realistically thought that Michigan would be undefeated this season. I think a one-loss campaign or even a two-loss campaign is still in the cards. Do I think that I'm as comfortable saying that they'll get to New Orleans as I was 3 weeks ago? No. But are expectations astronomical? No. This is one of the top flight football programs in the country, and the on-field product has shown it.
Yeah, I think year in and year out would probably be accurate, because every year they're wanting this team to outperform itself, I guess, in a word. But at the same time, there's programs that do that a lot, especially recent. You know, Oklahoma is a school that's gone from it's really taken it to the next step. You know, you can say what you want about the Big 12 and the level of competition there, but regardless, they've dominated that conference this decade. They've produced back-to-back Heisman Trophy winners, back-to-back number one picks. This year, they look like they're going to produce, at the very least, someone close to that.
Yeah.
I don't know if Jalen Hurts is going to be the number one pick. I highly doubt that. But as far as the Heisman goes, I mean, you kind of think he's a front runner. So there's reason for the concern, and I think it's because they see so much success elsewhere. And a lot of these people grew up, like myself, on Chad Henne and Mario Manningham and Mike Hart, the guys who were competing, and those guys too were falling close, getting close, but can never, win a national championship
And I think a lot of that comes from playing in the Big Ten. It's tough when your schedule every year is a gauntlet. And then you go out and you schedule a Notre Dame, and you have to go to Wisconsin, you have to go to State College. There are a lot of factors that play into that, and I think scheduling is towards the top of the list.
And I think we're seeing it this year, with when we compared the Clemson and Alabama schedule preseason, where Clemson and Alabama faced a combined, I think, 5 ranked teams combined.
Yep.
One of those for Clemson was Syracuse, who we learned is not that good.
Oh, yeah.
After getting obliterated by Maryland, who then lost to Temple.
Yep.
And we know that in the SEC, there's a lot of disappointment so far, I guess you could say, in the halfway point of it. Florida just lost its starting quarterback, so that probably gets a little bit easier too. Aside from that, though,
Michigan made him look like a running back in the Peach Bowl.
And I think Texas A&M too. They've been underwhelming, and then lost their starting running back.
They lost to Clemson by 2 scores.
And only putting up 10 points. Death Valley's Death Valley. Not many teams can put up that. But regardless, as far as Michigan's program and its expectations from its fan base, I think this fan base is used to the classic 90s, 80s Michigan, where they are pounding the rock and challenging teams and beating them, not just on the field, but not just with scheme, but physically, just playing harder and tougher, smarter. It was always an IQ type football team and program. Obviously, the struggles between Rich Rod and Brady Hoke were there and evident. And then when Jim Harbaugh was brought in, look, there's something to be said about man-made hype, where it's not natural, it's created. And I think in the first year of Jim Harbaugh's tenure, it was created, right?
Yeah.
And that roster was never going to win more than 9-10 games, maybe. You go out and get Jake Rudock, and it raises the ceiling a bit higher, but still, with that roster, no offense to those guys, it wasn't very deep. Jim Harbaugh does what we expected him to, I think, as people who were taking a step back and looking at the bigger picture. I think he outdid himself that first year, regardless of the loss at Utah. Blowing out Florida in that championship or in that bowl game was good too. But he's disappointed, obviously. Losing to Ohio State, I think that's the number one thing. I think if you beat Ohio State at least once out of these past 5 years, the talk is a lot different. I think you beat Ohio State once, and people aren't as pushy. They're not as panic mode all the time. Yeah. They're not as demanding. They're not putting as much pressure on Jim Harbaugh. And I don't think they're pressuring Jim Harbaugh. I don't think he really feels any of it. I just mean they're creating their own pressure for him. But that's my take. So
yeah, and it's something that Michigan's quite literally been inches away from doing. 2016, a lot of different replay angles showed a lot of different things, but that's about as close as Michigan has gotten in what feels like forever. And last year, going into Columbus, they put themselves in a great position to be in that game, and then with a win into the CFP, but ultimately couldn't execute. But they do such a good job throughout the year by putting themselves into that position and really committing to the body of work that it takes, and then it's execution where everything falls through. And you really got to feel like they're on the cusp, and they've been on the cusp. And this year, definitely a lot of early season woes to work through, but the expectations of this being the best year under Harbaugh yet I don't think they're unreasonable.
No. As far as this year, no, I don't think so at all.
Mm-hmm.
I think Jim Harbaugh went out and got an OC, unproven, but obviously had design and had been at stops.
Brilliant football mind.
Right, and won championships at Penn State, won championships on his staff at Alabama, and he wasn't a quality control assistant. Okay, he was very involved in everything. It wasn't like this guy was somewhere in the fold. He was quite literally at the top, if not the second right-hand man to Loxley in one spot and Moorhead in the other.
Yeah.
Let's move on to another question. So to answer that question, no, I don't think so as far as this year.
I'm with you there.
I think early on, yes. I think 2015, 2017, yeah.
Look, and with that, my closing thought, nobody does transform a program without their own guys. And now in year 5, Harbaugh has a full cycle of recruits and a year of the redshirts from his first class. And now even with the early ages where these kids are being recruited, that class could begin in someone's sophomore or junior year. So, really right now is when the program is truly his.
Yeah,
the first time.
I think this is the most fair time frame to say, if not now, when. As far as Ohio State goes, as far as Big Ten championship goes, I think it's fair to ask that. Now, who would Michigan turn to? That's a whole other conversation. Moving on from Jim Harbaugh, where would they go? That's a whole other conversation. And I don't think that there's really much out there that they could turn to.
It's not
there's
a conversation.
only so much you can do.
It's not a conversation anyone's going to be having anytime soon because Harbaugh's not leaving Michigan anytime soon.
If somebody could out-recruit Ohio State, they would be elsewhere, right? If Michigan really thought there's a guy out there who could out-recruit Ohio State legally, then I think they would be here. But I just don't think I don't think there's one out there. I really don't. Alabama and Clemson can barely out-recruit Ohio State. They're still winning championships, but the composite is still very much so in favor of Ohio State's
usually
roster.
Separated by a few thousandths of a point every year. So moving on, Brandon. This one's from Paulie. When do you think we will see speed in space?
So this one's interesting because I think what the sample size we've had, it's small. So don't get me wrong on that, it's small. But in that Army game, it was like, okay, hello, things are bad here. It's fourth quarter.
Oh yeah,
you're about to go to overtime with the Service Academy. Don't get me wrong, Army, a team who got 50 AP votes, in the poll. They're I think 27th right now, or somewhere around there as far as the polls go.
More votes than Michigan State.
Several
might
more.
I add?
Several more. So I think as far as timing goes, I'm wondering when, because it's almost like what I just said. If not now, when? And that's how I felt in that fourth quarter of Army. But it felt like those designs were constructed around the ball security and the lack thereof, I should say, of ball security. And I feel like the confidence in Shea Patterson, the confidence in just the team holding on to the football needs to tick up. You can only put so much blame on the coaches because the design is there. It really is. And you've seen it. There's been hints of it. It's almost like you don't always get Parmesan cheese in every bite of spaghetti. You know what I'm saying? There's hints of it in there. And I feel like that's what we've seen so far out of this offense. That's not a good thing. I think they needed to put all of the flavor in it right away, try it all out, and let it roll the rest of the year. But I'm not an offensive coordinator or a head football coach. I am merely a podcaster. But, as far as when we're going to see it, I think, like I said, if not now, when? If we don't see it against Wisconsin, I don't know if we're going to. I think this is the perfect perfect defense to take advantage of a team with. Michigan is quite obviously more athletic, quite obviously quicker than Wisconsin. I don't know if they're tougher. I don't know if they're stronger, but they're faster and they're more athletic. And if you're ever going to use your speed and space, now is probably the best time.
To answer your question of if not now, when, I think a viable answer to the when prong is when we see Donovan Peoples-Jones back on the field. I think that's a guy who can make a play or at the very least impact a play from either side of the field, short balls, medium, over the middle, down the sideline, deep through the seam. I think this is a guy who's a threat, who commands defensive attention wherever he is, and if he does come back fully healthy and makes that DPJ impact, then it opens up a lot of options for Gaddis. And I think that with play designs, with the way he's already getting Ronnie Bell open. I mean, Ronnie Bell has had 3 touchdowns bounce off his fingertips.
Yep.
I mean, that could be the difference between people praising Shea and calling for his head.
As much as this program lately has been a whole lot of almosts, I hate to say it, but this offense has been a whole lot of almosts early on. I think, and I say it over and over again, the design is there, the execution just hasn't been. And whether we see it or not is up for debate here, the execution, against Wisconsin. But there's really no better defense to take advantage of than Wisconsin's, in my opinion, as far as speed and space goes. So on to our next question, and this one comes from Jackson from Twitter. So shout out Jackson. Asked about the wide receiver size for Michigan, which obviously Nico Collins, Tariq Black, pretty large men.
6'4" and 6'3", respectively.
Not boys, quite literally men, against the Wisconsin secondary. Now, Devon Terrell is a guy who, Duron Harrell, my bad, not Devon, sorry, Duron, is a guy, redshirt sophomore cornerback. He's standing about 6'2", and I think he'll probably get pitted up against Nico. I don't know if he'll shadow Nico because Michigan only had one target at Nico against Army, a guy Nico was quite bigger, much larger than the Army corners, and we did not see him utilized very much with only one target in the first half. So I really can't speak towards Wisconsin saying, okay, we have to highlight Nico with our biggest guy. So I don't think that'll happen, but I think he will guard the X on most plays. He does seem to be their larger guy. All other corners and all other safeties are hovering around 5'11 to 5'10. Reggie Pearson, one of the safeties, a Romulus native from Michigan, 3-star, didn't get recruited by Michigan, didn't get offered by Michigan, ended up at Wisconsin, and he's starting as a redshirt freshman. And I think he's probably the most athletic of that bunch, a guy who can hit hard, a guy who is prone to making mistakes in coverage, but is going to come up and run support. But as far as size goes, Michigan really could take advantage of the size because the safeties over top aren't as large, and Michigan is known for taking the top off when they want to go deep, especially with these big guys, Nico and Tariq. So, yes, the question was just the question literally read wide receiver size versus UW secondary. So I'm going to answer with yes, like there's very much so a matchup there that Michigan could take advantage of over top. I think Devon Terrell doesn't really offer you much because he's 6'2", and I don't think that Michigan's going to have a guy that towers over him. They have a couple of guys that are slightly taller than him, but not a guy that's going to power over him. But as far as over top, I think absolutely they can take advantage of it.
Right, and with that, Shea Patterson telling the media this week that he does feel 100%. He's really been banged up since the first play of the Middle Tennessee State game. If Shea is truthful in saying that he feels 100%, this is an aggressive quarterback who came up in a pro spread offense, a guy who knows what it's like to take shots down the field in a system like this. If he doesn't have a nagging oblique injury, which he described as mental during his media availability this week, this is a guy who's going to be itching to throw the ball over the top. And quite honestly, we've really seen him do that a few times this year. And if he can make it a regular thing and really get his head in the right spot when it comes to that, it's something that could take this offense to the next level. Something that Shea's very capable of doing, I think.
Last question before we move on came from Nate as well. He asked me something pretty simple, off topic, so I'd mention it here in the end. Asked me about my favorite brew. And for anybody that knows me, I do like a nice cold glass of beer. And if I had to pick one, I'm not going domestic. Labatt Blue is my favorite. It'll always be my favorite. It's simple, it's crisp, it's good, it's delicious. If I had to go with a craft beer, I don't know. Oktoberfest is good in October, I would say. Oberon's good. But I would say my favorite craft is pear and blackberry. So, yeah, quick one. We don't really need to delve into that. So moving on to our – no, go ahead.
We do need to delve into the 13th ranked Wisconsin Badgers.
We do.
This is a defense that will host Michigan with the number one ranking in the country. They have allowed – granted, this is against Central Michigan and South Florida, a pair of games that they won by a combined 110 points without giving up a point. But they're averaging 107.5 yards allowed per game. To put that in perspective, that's right around where Shea Patterson was throwing the ball at the end of the first quarter against Middle Tennessee State. They have given up about 2 yards per play, an astronomically low number, about half as much as the next best team. And they've only faced 101 plays. They've been on the field for 101 plays. This is a defense that gets off the field, and you got to figure multiple 3-and-outs per quarter at that rate. So definitely a defense that has stood out against two lesser opponents and a defense that is in for a challenge of its own this week.
Yeah, as you mentioned, the level of competition in those first games has to be considered. I don't think that it needs to be too heavily weighed upon because Central looked good against Akron. Granted, it was Akron, but they put up points at home, and they were able to win that game and get one in the win column. South Florida went on to lose to Georgia Tech, putting up only 10 points. Georgia Tech not really a world beater defensively. So I think, the first two games Wisconsin played, both teams were good. And, it's a fact. It's definitely a fact that Army is better than both of those teams. That's a fact. Michigan's had the tougher schedule so far because I think Middle Tennessee State's better than both of those teams.
That's fair.
However, to shut out two teams is tough, man. I mean, you put a team in the MAC and they go 12-0 playing only MAC teams, or whatever it was, 9-0 playing only MAC teams. That's a good team. To go undefeated in any league is hard. to shut out 2 teams back-to-back first 2 weeks of the season is not easy, right?
Yeah.
So credit where it's due to Wisconsin. This defense has always been good. It's a staple. It's a brand at Wisconsin to have a good defense, to be tough, and to be strong. I think Michigan has taken advantage of Wisconsin in recent years, aside from 2017, because of its speed advantage. We saw last year in that read option with Shea Patterson early on in the game where he was able to take off. We saw Karan Higdon play a good game as well. I just think Michigan has a speed advantage in this game. Whether they put that speed in space, pun intended, is still yet to be seen. But I think this defense for Wisconsin has its obvious advantages, which is it has a strong defensive line. That's going to challenge Michigan's interior with its pass rush. It's going to blitz its linebackers in the A-gaps and, again, challenge it, much like Middle Tennessee State did successfully as well.
Right. That's going to be a pretty big area for Michigan's running backs, given the, at least outside of Zach Charbonnet, given these struggles in picking up pass blocks.
And with the rumors regarding Charbonnet, and we won't delve into them too much because there's not much to be known at this point, but with the rumors that he might not, be 100% for this game, it starts to make you wonder what his snap count will be, if at all. And he is the best blocker on this team in the backs without question. He's the best blocker probably overall from a skill position standpoint as far as protecting the passer goes. And I think, you're going to miss his run style. You're going to miss his game-breaking ability. But I think Christian Turner is a good runner. And I think True Wilson can come in and pass block.
They've both shown it.
Yeah, I just think the biggest downgrade, True Wilson, if he can get healthy for this game, can come in and fill a very he can give them something that without Charbonnet would be a huge loss, and that's the pass blocking.
Right.
Okay, now I'm not saying it's definitive that Charbonnet's not playing. Honestly, if you're listening to this, let me reiterate, I have no idea what's going on there. I have an idea of what's going on as of today, as far as what he did today, but there's no decision yet. So I'm not going to sit here and play, Mr. Hidden Codes and all of that. I don't know, honestly. So if I did, I would probably say something about it. But a lot of people, I think we have, 6 tweets asking about that in the mailbag. So there's my way to address it. Not even prompted. It wasn't even in the plans to address it. But that's my way of addressing it, is we honestly don't know. But in the event that he does not play, their biggest loss won't be his run style. It'll be his pass blocking.
Absolutely.
Unless they get True Wilson back, which he can come in and fill that void because he is a terrific pass blocker. The only problem is when Zach Charbonnet's in, they have to account for Zach Charbonnet. I think it's a lot easier for Wisconsin to see True Wilson and think, okay, probably going to be a pass. Rather than, okay, we've got to make sure we stop this guy. Not saying True Wilson's not a good running back, but he's good for about 4 to 6 yards. Zach Charbonnet is able to find holes, blitz through them, and make 12 or 16 yards out of a 4 to 6 yard run.
With regard to True, you're really going to want some senior leadership in this game. If he can get healthy, there is much reason to put him on the field. I mean, this is a guy who was part of the 2016 team. This is a guy who last went to Madison in 2017 when Michigan last played them. With the way Camp Randall's going to be rocking on Saturday, ranked team versus ranked team, national stage, nationally televised, you're going to want the communication that a leader like True Wilson can bring. But let me ask you this, in terms of mental edge, with the way Michigan beat up on Wisconsin last year, 38-13 at the Big House, a lot of these Wisconsin guys are returners, or at least they were on the team last year and felt the sting of that defeat. Are they going to come in with a little chip on their shoulder, knowing that Michigan's coming to them this year?
I would say that, but I feel like Michigan has one too following these past 2 weeks. I think yes, Wisconsin will have a chip. But I feel as if Michigan getting dropped in the polls, not that polls matter, I know that, but I'm saying we saw all week during media availability that these players said, yes, we see it. 110%, we see it. We see what they say on Twitter. We hear what they say in the media. We understand the doubt. We hear the doubt, yada, yada, yada. Does it affect their everyday life? I don't know. What they say is what they say, right? We can't take everything for, 100% in this world of media. What I can't, but I don't think they would say that without meaning it. They wouldn't say, hey, I see that stuff without meaning it. So
Josh Metella said that he follows 800 people on social media, 700 of which are Michigan fans. I mean, whether it was a joke or not, I mean, it's still just it goes to show. I mean, the perception around this and really the criticism and what's being said about them, and quite frankly, it gives them something. I mean, the word we heard bouncing around Schembechler Hall this week was statement.
Right.
Donovan Jeter says that the defense wants to get back to being one of the best units in the nation, if not the best unit in the nation. Shea Patterson said that the offense is going to make a statement.
So I think both teams look. This is as much of a prove-it game as it gets. You really couldn't ask for much more of a prove-it game than this for both teams on both sides. Wisconsin is always thought to be a stagnant offense team that's defense is going to carry it as far as it goes. However many games Wisconsin wins, they're going to win all of them because of its defense, not because of its offense. Okay, and the same can pretty much be said about Michigan in the past. Michigan's more athletic,
especially since Don Brown's arrival.
Right. And, Michigan is more athletic. But these are very similar identities in the past couple of years. And both of these teams have a chance to break through. Wisconsin has a Heisman-esque running back that 110% can make another case for that trophy after this game if he can blitz through a very strong and respected defensive unit. The first two games, yes, we've seen Jonathan Taylor do amazing things. But if he can do amazing things against a defense of this stature, then that says a lot for his Heisman hype. But not only that, it elevates Wisconsin to another level. Can they control the ball and dominate a Michigan team in this game? Okay, it sends both teams after this game go opposite directions. If this game goes down to the wire, and it's a field goal game, then both teams probably stay right around the same. All right, you'll probably see the loser fall to about 14. You'll probably see the winner jump to about 7. Fair?
Yeah.
That's fair. This isn't a make it or break it game, but this does say a lot about what both teams' identity is following the game. Is Michigan going to figure out its offense and balance both sides of the ball? Can Wisconsin find something more dimensional than just its running back? Can it find other weapons to open up the running game even more for Jonathan Taylor, a guy who creates absolutely everything out of absolutely nothing sometimes? Yeah. He'll have no hole, and he'll just find a way. Mm-hmm. He'll find a way. So there's a lot of questions in this game, but as far as the chip on the shoulder for Wisconsin following last year's loss, absolutely. Over the past few years, Michigan's really controlled Wisconsin aside from 2017. They limited Jonathan Taylor last year. He would burst for about 6 to 8 or 4 to 6 every carry. He was never really getting stopped. But Michigan isn't in this game to get Jonathan Taylor behind the line every single time. Let's note that Jonathan Taylor was stopped for a loss a few times against South Florida.
Yeah.
But that being said, Michigan is trying to contain Jonathan Taylor while forcing the quarterback at Wisconsin, Cohn is his last name.
Jack Cohn.
Jack Cohn. I was going to say it. The Long Island man. We talked about this. If you're an avid listener, then you already know the Jack Cohn.
You remember week 1 of Hail to the Pod?
The Jack Cohn Daniel Dash connection. They're going to force him to throw downfield and go over top because they're giving him things underneath is what he relies on, and that's what every Wisconsin quarterback has relied on. And when Michigan makes a quarterback like that go deep, typically it works out for their defense. Because why? Because they have some ball hawks. They create turnovers. Sure, the offense has struggled with its turnovers, but you cannot discredit the defense for what it does. It creates a ton of them.
Right, and with regard to that Michigan defense, Wisconsin plays a very similar offense to what Michigan played over the last 4 or 5 years under Harbaugh. It's that West Coast, slow, ground and pound, throw it when the opportunity presents itself sort of game. If anything, for the veterans on this Michigan defense, it's going to feel like the last few years of practice.
Yep, and they control the time of possession.
Exactly.
Not as much as Army by any means.
Right. Well,
but they're
you'll be
slowing the game down.
hard-pressed to find a team that tries to sit on the ball the way Army does.
And if Michigan does what it's preached all year as far as speed and space goes in this game, and I know we keep bringing that up, but if it does do that again, then you're going to see a Michigan offense that wants to score quickly and wants to move quickly, and then you're going to see a Wisconsin offense come out and move slowly. Now, where Michigan can really take advantage, and I think break this game open, is forcing Wisconsin to go quick and forcing them to make mistakes by forcing Cohn to throw deep and forcing him, no huddle and various other things, right, where they can't only rely on Jonathan Taylor. If this game is 0-0 at halftime or 10-3 at halftime or 7-7 or anything of that nature, Wisconsin's probably going to win the ball game.
Yeah.
But if Michigan can come out and force Wisconsin early, not only to force itself to speed up, but to almost not so much panic, but really, really make things go quicker and mess up their game plan.
Yeah.
That's where I think Michigan can blow it open.
Right. And with that Wisconsin passing attack, it's Cohen's first year as the starter following Hornibrook's transfer to Florida State. Cohen's top target, Quintez Cephus, he has 9 receptions for 169 yards and 2 touchdowns against Central Michigan and South Florida. But this is a guy who was expelled a year ago and then reinstated just this past August. So you got to figure it's two rather new guys at the forefront of this passing game. If you could get them into an uncomfortable situation, you got to like that as the Michigan defense. It's a set of circumstances that they should be working towards all game.
And Cone really hasn't gone deep much this year. I believe he has under 3 attempts over 20 yards that have been completed. Something around that mark. I don't have the exact stat, but I know it's right around there. Have they just not needed to? Sure, they've dominated both games, and they've been able to rely on their workhorse to do it. But regardless, it hasn't been proven yet, and I think Michigan's going to force them to prove it. That all starts and ends with containing Jonathan Taylor.
Yes.
Jonathan Taylor has his way with this thin interior defensive line that has been less than impressive and pushed off the ball a lot by teams like Army, who is much smaller than them. If they get pushed off the line by Wisconsin's offensive line, which hasn't been very impressive but is nonetheless very talented, such as all Wisconsin offensive lines over the past what feels like forever, then that's it. That's it. That's the game right there. I think Jonathan Taylor takes it over at that point, and which leads us into our hail to the spread, and then we'll get to our predictions. But that's Wisconsin. Those are the Badgers. Anything else you want to add in there?
No, I just think that it's going to be a matter of getting Wisconsin uncomfortable, and by making them uncomfortable, you're probably going to be making some big plays. You got to figure that it's going to take forcing a turnover at Camp Randall early on, going up by a score or two, not coming out the way you did against Army and playing from behind, but it's going to take a big play or two or potentially three to put the Wolverines where they want to be in this game.
All right, so let's move on to hail to the spread. We'll touch on some of these games now before we give you our predictions and wrap up the show. As always, we break down some games across the country. We talk about some spreads, where they've gone, what we think they're going to do. It's 2019. This is common practice. This is a fun conversation. It's always probably my favorite part of the show. I know it's maybe not the most productive for everybody at home, but we got to have some fun ourselves, right? This is our show after all. So let's hail to the spread a little bit, and let's start off with something not too far away. We've got Michigan State and Northwestern. Now, as we know, Michigan State took its first loss of the season in one of the most bizarre, zany endings to a football game I've ever seen, NFL or college. What did you make of that ending?
I mean, they must not have their calculators handy on the sideline, but, I think that an error like that, something that is sheer mental, that's inexcusable. If you want to be a ranked team, if you want to play in a New Year's Six bowl, you need to have the discipline to send 11 guys out to the huddle. There can't be a miscommunication when the game is on the line with seconds left. But on the flip side of the coin, how do you put yourself in that situation over the first 59 minutes of the game? I mean, that game was in East Lansing. You can't blame that on a trip across 3 different time zones over to the Sun Devils. That's something that you need to have a game plan at home, which you can go out and execute and put a bad team away. We knew it would be a low-scoring game. The over-under was somewhere in the low 40s. Michigan State wasn't a crazy favorite. That wasn't a 20-something point spread. But at the same token, it was never meant to be a game. So definitely some red flags.
Yeah, I mean, to lose was one thing. I thought it was going to be closer, but to lose was bad. So let's talk Michigan State, Northwestern. These are two teams whose offenses are not good, and defenses are, Northwestern's is, I don't think it's anywhere near what Michigan State's is. But regardless, Northwestern put up 7 against Stanford's defense. Now, let's remind you, Stanford's defense gave up 28 in the first quarter against UCF, and ultimately 38 in the first half, and then lost, was 51 to about 28, something like that. They got absolutely obliterated.
Hot garbage.
Over 50 points. Northwestern only put up 7. Granted, it was on the road. And then they put up 30 against UNLV at home. Saw a little bit more wide sets with them. They're trying to spread it out more with Hunter Johnson. He's been underwhelming, of course. So this game, it's a wild one because it opened at 6.5 with Michigan State being a road favorite. It's now at 9.5. For those at home listening that don't know a whole lot, that's a pretty sizable move in a few days' time to open up 3 spots. This is one that at 6.5, I think I liked Michigan State at 6.5. I think that they're probably going to win this game, and I think by a touchdown was a fair one. I like to see 2.5 more than I like to see 6.5 because that gives you a lot more room. It's obviously 4 spots different. I'll even take 4.5 over that. However, because even at 5.5, you get room for 2 field goals. Anyways, if they can make those. Anyways, at 9.5, I feel like you're starting to see. I think you'll start to see a little bit more pushback for the Wildcats here.
Oh yeah.
Which might close this line at about 8.5. But let's stick with the 9.5, which is where it's at. Time of recording, 6:22 Eastern Standard Time on Thursday, or I'm sorry, on Wednesday. At 9.5, I think I like the Wildcats. Northwestern has won how many in a row against Michigan State? It's at least, I think it's 3.
Yeah, no, it's a multi-year
lines.
streak, and you gotta figure with the way these offenses are both playing, is anyone gonna score 9.5?
Speaking of which, the total is at 38.5, which is something to gather. I would say.
as we just said, UCF put up 38 in the first half against Stanford last week, which held Northwestern to 7. Northwestern to 7 over the course of the entire game in week 1.
And the over there was 61. So for consolation, that's almost double what this total is. So in this game, I'm going to take the Wildcats plus 9.5. I think Michigan State wins by right around the 6 or 7 mark. And I think they bounce back in a way. As far as the over-under, I'm going to take the under. 38.5. There's no way I can take these teams to cover that. I think this is a, I don't even know, 17-13 type game. Right around that. So I'll take Michigan State to win, but I'll take Northwestern to cover, and I'll take the under. You got anything here in the total?
Yeah, I'm going to go under 2. I don't think Northwestern scores a touchdown in this game. I'm going to come out and say it. I think Michigan State wins at 13-3.
That sounds quite realistic. I would not doubt it. So let's move on to one a little bit more interesting with a couple of more high-profile teams. This is a top 10 matchup. Georgia and Notre Dame. We saw this game last year. Was a great game at Notre Dame.
Oh, yeah.
Notre Dame walked out with losers by 1 point. And Uga was the bane to Notre Dame's undefeated season. This game started at 11.5 of dog. The dogs were the favorites here. I shouldn't say dogs when I'm talking about gambling. The Georgia Bulldogs were 11.5 point favorites going into this game. And they've opened up to 14 flat.
Oh, yeah.
It'll likely close around that, I would assume, unless they get some pushback here for Notre Dame, which might lower it. At 14, that is a large number. Notre Dame on the road here. They've looked good. I like Ian Book. I've always liked Ian Book. I think he's a guy who can launch the ball. Georgia's defense is good. It's very athletic. The same can be said about Notre Dame, but I don't think they're quite as athletic. I don't think they're really close to athletic as Georgia. Georgia's done a phenomenal job recruiting over the past years. I'll take Georgia in this game. I like the 11.5 line. I don't like the 14 line. I'll take Notre Dame. But if this game gets down to 13.5 or 13, lean Georgia. I think Georgia wins by 14. I just don't like the 14 line.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. I think that going to Athens is very difficult. And I think that that's reflected in this spread. I don't think there's a shot. Okay, I think there's an overwhelmingly good chance that Notre Dame loses this game. Do I think they lose it by double digits? I think they lose it by something around there. I mean, my gut feeling is saying that this is going to be a 27-17 win for Georgia, or maybe 34-24. I don't like Georgia by 14. I would take Notre Dame at this point. But if that line gets back down to single digits, then I would bet Georgia.
So you would need them at 9.5?
Yes.
So you think it's a 10-point deficit?
I think so.
Over-unders at 58.5. Both teams have high-powered offenses, but both teams also have pretty good defenses as well. So this is an interesting line at 58.5. You would need right around a 31-28 type game, 32-28 type game to cover. Anything above that, you'll be in good territory. Anything below would be the under. This is a game that it's in Georgia. It is high-profile, primetime, college game day. I like the under. I do. I think defenses usually perform in primetime. We didn't see it in Texas LSU, but I think defenses typically perform in primetime. I'll take the under here. I like this line as low as about 56. Right around 56 to 55, I'm probably moving down. I'll say 54.5 is the cutoff for the over, but at 58.5, I like the under.
Yeah, I don't think both teams are going to get to 30. I think one defense is going to step up and take control of the game and maybe hold the other team to high teens, low 20s, and really, I don't think that we see a lopsided primetime game in this case. Maybe the winning team goes for somewhere in the mid-30s. I think 35 or 38 would be a good winning team final score prediction. I think it goes under, but not by much.
Yeah, this is like a 31-17 type game for me. Moving on, we're going to Auburn A&M. This game is at Texas A&M. This might surprise some people who don't follow lines, but Auburn is a 3.5-point dog as what I believe is the better team. However, everyone knows Texas A&M is a tough place to play. The 12th man, who is in the crowd, not in the field, is a tough environment to be around.
Mark D'Antonio got that one mixed up.
Right. A&M without their starting... Mike? I think it's Mark.
Mark, yeah.
A&M without their starting running back, Jashawn Corbin, who is a pretty big game breaker, in my opinion. Losing him was tough. A&M struggled in their primetime game against Clemson.
Never easy going into Death Valley, but it's a red flag to go in and put up 10 points.
Look, in the first game of the year, if anybody listened in the first Hell to the Spread in episode 1, I didn't like Bo Nix as a true freshman playing against Oregon. I do not like him once again against not against Texas A&M's defense, but against this environment. This is going to be tough for him to go into. I think he's a baller. I think he's going to be good in a couple of years, probably next year right away with the way that trajectories are nowadays. I think the environment's tough. That being said, I think this is like a 2-point, 3-point game. 3.5 is tough for me. 2.5, I would take A&M. 3.5, I'm staying away. But if I had to choose, I'll take Auburn.
Yeah, that Auburn defense is for real.
That's the biggest thing for me as well, outside of the environment. Mm-hmm. The over/under's at 48. I'm gonna have to go under on this game because I think, as you pointed out, Auburn's defense is gonna limit Kellen Mond, in my opinion. Without their starting running back, I don't think they have a game breaker there, and I don't think Auburn's true freshman quarterback and its core. Seth Williams, a guy who's been banged up, the receiver. I just don't think this is a game that's going to light the world on fire with points. I like this game about 24-21, but this game is weird. I think this is like a 1-2 point deficit. I don't know how we're going to get there. There's a lot of variables in football, but this really feels like a 1 or 2 point final game.
Yeah.
So
I'm with you there.
I'll take A&M to win by 2 because of its environment. And because I don't trust the freshman quarterback, and I also don't trust Gus Malzahn either. Mm-hmm. I think the Oregon magic was great, but I feel like it's not going to happen twice.
That's fair.
How do you feel about the over? I got the under here. I think anything below 45, you could probably chase the under. Or I'm sorry, anything under 44, you could probably chase the over. Anything over that, I would chase the under.
Yeah, I mean, I think even if it's 42, I think I would still take the under.
Yeah.
I think that this is a game where you're going to see a lot of punts. You're going to see a lot of ugly run plays that get stuffed in the backfield. You're going to see some, at least for Auburn, playing in College Station, you're going to see some miscommunications on offense, probably some false starts, maybe a hold here and there. It's going to be a sloppy game.
Yeah.
This is not going to be your 55-52 final score. I think it might finish somewhere in the 17-14 range, maybe 21-14. So,
lastly, we have Arizona State and Colorado. Arizona State obviously coming off an enormous victory over Michigan State on the road. I think Michigan State's defense took nothing changed there. It's still a phenomenal defense. Arizona State gets a little bit of a different matchup here. They see a much more high-powered offense in Colorado, who's put up 52 against Colorado State, a rivalry game, 34 against Nebraska, a rivalry game, and then Air Force, who it lost to at home and was only able to put up 23. That's a battle of possession, triple option for Air Force, limiting Colorado's offense to be out in the field. You see what happens. They have a terrific wide receiver at Colorado who's probably a first-round pick. They have a nice high-powered offense that's going to put up points when it's allowed to. Arizona State has one that with 28 freshmen on the field beating Michigan State. Quick quarterback. Benjamin is a guy who if he's on a different team, because I don't think Arizona State's going to be a national spotlight team when it's all said and done. Could be a Heisman guy if he's at Michigan, Alabama, Clemson, one of those bigger schools, because I do think he's a big game breaker, even though he didn't show that against Michigan State until the final play, one of the final plays. The over-under here is at 50. I like the over in this game.
I do too.
Because I think that Colorado's defense is going to be like It's going to be like playing for Arizona State. It's going to be like playing on Madden's Hall of Fame mode for a month and then suddenly switching to rookie mode.
Oh, yeah.
Not saying their defense is that bad,
good way of
but
looking at
compared
it.
to Michigan State's, it's far worse. And I think they're going to have a lot of fun seeing, they faced that test. They're confident now. Arizona State last year, they went out and lost the following game after beating Michigan State in the upset. They lost to San Diego State. I think the mood there is that they need to stick together. They need to keep the level head, and they need to win this ball game. They're 7.5-point favorites. That's tough. I think this is a high-powered game. I think it's like a 42 to 28, 35, somewhere in there. I do think the Devils win, but I think they win by around 7. So 7.5 I won't like. 5.5 I would grab the Devils. But anything above 5.5, I wouldn't touch it. I would just touch the over.
Yeah, and I think specifically with that mindset adjustment, Arizona State's starting a true freshman at quarterback. A true freshman who goes into East Lansing and sees what he saw and faces the pressure that he faced. You come out of that a completely changed player for the better. And I think that's going to be on display this week. I think that last week was more than a learning curve. It was just a day of growth for a true freshman. And you can't ask for a much better atmosphere or an opposing defense than what you'll find in East Lansing if you want to take that next step as a true freshman.
And they're returning home.
Right.
It's like getting off the plane and seeing all your supporters. I mean, this crowd's going to be raucous. Arizona State is obviously a very big party school, and kids are going to be there, and they're going to be rowdy. So I like the Devils in this game. I would take anything in the 5.5 range. I'd still probably take a 6.5. 7.5 is too big for me. 50, I would take the over here. Also, I know I use the narrative of true freshmen on Bo Nix, so my bad. I just think Texas A&M's defense and atmosphere is much tougher than Jaden Daniels returning home against the Colorado defense. So I'll take that true freshman over the other. So let's segue that into our final predictions. So it's the big noon kickoff. It's at Camp Randall. Quite the environment, as tough as it gets. Let's look at the storylines of this game. Wisconsin probably have a chip on their shoulder. Given that they were pretty much obliterated in the Big House last year.
Game was never close.
Primetime, night game, under the lights, and just taking it. Michigan took it to them from start until finish. I'm sure they remember that. Now they're in front of their crowd. Last time Michigan went there, it was probably the worst team in the Harbaugh era. Regardless, they competed for about 3 quarters, and then obviously Wisconsin would pull away. Jonathan Taylor is the biggest storyline in this game. Heisman deserving type runner, a guy who will challenge Michigan's thin defensive tackles. The interior rush just hasn't been what they wanted so far. And then the other narrative in this game is the offense for Michigan. What is it going to do? Is it going to open up? Are we going to see new things? Can Shea Patterson hold on to the ball? So it's the offense with some subtitles, with some things underneath, some subheadings, asking, okay, what are they going to do? It's not just one thing. It's not just the ball security. It's the play designs. It's not just the play designs. It's will Zach Charbonnet be out there? It's not just will Zach Charbonnet be out there. It's if he isn't, who will be, and what are they going to do? There's a lot of variables in this game. There's a lot of questions in this game, which leads us to our predictions. I'll let you go first.
I think Wisconsin wins this one 27-21. I think it's going to be a game the whole way through. This is one that, there's going to be, clock's going to hit the 2-minute warning, and you're not going to know for sure who's going to win yet. I definitely think that, look, if Michigan's offense can't turn the corner this week, they're going to lose this game by double digits. But I do think that we'll see something trending upward in this game. Regardless of if Charbonnet's out there or not, I still think that with the play designs, it's just going to click with a healthy Shea Patterson. 2 games worth of now trial and error, if you want to call it that. I think that they've been really close to hitting it off on some explosive plays. The program defines explosive plays as 16 yards through the air, 12 yards on the ground. And I think this weekend we'll see a healthy dosage of attempts for the very explosive plays that they've been on the cusp of.
So I looked at all the reasons that Michigan should win this game. It's all based on if.
Yeah.
Right? The defensive line, interior's pressure just hasn't been there. It's not anywhere near ready enough and convinced me enough, or is it convinced me that it's healthy enough to handle a Jonathan Taylor? There isn't a Devin Bush, right? I think Josh Metellus is really the best run support they're going to get, him and Khaleke Hudson and even Jordan Glasgow, who's been good. Michigan is going to stay in this game because its defense is going to keep it there. And I think it's going to, at some point, find a way to stop Taylor, whether it's too soon or too late, or not too soon, whether it's in time or too late, is left unsaid. But in looking at the reason Michigan will win this game, it's based on what ifs. Can this offense, if this offense opens it up, if this offense executes on that, if this offense controls the ball without losing it. All of those things are left unproven. Here's what's proven. Wisconsin has an elite defense. Wisconsin has an elite running back. Wisconsin's environment is going to push Michigan to its limits. I do think Michigan has the athletes, has the speed to win this game in the space offensively. I don't think that they have it on the defensive line to hold up Jonathan Taylor. So I like your prediction at 27-21. I'm going to take it a step further, and I think Wisconsin wins this game. Just because I haven't seen anything out of Michigan that's proven enough for me to pick them. I don't think that the world ends during this loss. I don't think that this loss is solely because of the Army game or any of those things. It's because we haven't seen what we thought we were going to yet, and what we haven't seen what is enough to beat a team like Wisconsin.
Yeah, and if this is a Week 8 or a Week 9 game, it's a completely different complexion, because by then you got to figure all the kinks have been worked out, all these bumps have been smoothed through, but for now they're question marks, and you can't ignore them.
I like Wisconsin. I like them 28-24. I think we have a close game. I think there's probably a defensive turnover for Wisconsin that breaks it open, that puts them in a position to score, because you put Jonathan Taylor in Wisconsin's offense in the red zone, it's probably going to work out for them, right? And I think that's what happens in this game, and that's what breaks it open. I do think if Michigan can execute on offense, there is a path for them to win this game. It's nowhere near a for sure thing, a foregone conclusion that Michigan isn't going to win this game. I just think we haven't seen yet why they will win this game. And Wisconsin's proven it, albeit against inferior opponents. But that being said, Michigan's faced inferior opponents as well, maybe not to that magnitude. But all the same, Wisconsin wins this game, in my opinion, 28-24. The freak out begins, the panic begins, and I think Michigan figures it out, carries on a good season, probably goes 10-2. And that all kind of boils down to that final game.
Yeah.
But as far as this week goes, I like the Badgers. But let's pick out some guys who we think can break this game open. I think it's first and foremost, it has to be Shea Patterson.
Yeah.
And for Michigan, it has to be Shea Patterson. Yes. Otherwise, they don't win this game. Like, it absolutely has to be Shea Patterson. Or let me reiterate, it won't win this game without Shea Patterson playing like himself. But since he hasn't proven that, I'm going to go ahead and take Tariq Black, because I think he's a guy who's all over making plays in space when he called upon. And I think if they design it around him, he's a big boy. And I think that the 6'3" corner, Devon Terrell, I think was his name. I cannot think of it off the top of my head. But I think the 6'2" corner for Wisconsin is going to be off Tariq a lot. And when he's not on Tariq, I think Michigan has an advantage there at 6'2.5", 6'3", whatever he's at now, to take advantage of the 5'11" safeties that'll be on him, and the 5'11" nickelback that'll be on him if they line him up in the slot. Sure, he's not going to break off and run for a touchdown in those events, but he's going to give them a lot of first downs, like he has in a lot of the RPO situations across the middle. And at the same time, if they break him out to the outside, he's got the route running ability and the catch radius to take advantage of a guy who's about 4 inches smaller than him.
Yeah, and he has showed it.
And whether they do that or not, I don't know, because they didn't do it against the Army. Mm-hmm. And that's why I can't pick them. But if I had to,
they didn't do a lot of things against Army,
right? But if I had to pick a guy offensively, Tariq. Defensively, I think it's got to be Josh Metellus. I mean, time and time again, he makes big plays, and I think he makes big plays in this game. Will it be enough? We'll see. But again, I think this is a game where the defense does what it needs to do, contains Jonathan Taylor as much as it can, but the offense just hasn't proven enough. So.
Yeah. On the offensive side of the ball, I'm going to go with a not-so-sexy pick. It's going to be his season debut, but I do think that John Runyon Jr. makes a massive impact in this game. On Monday, Ben Bredesen said that he has a telepathic connection to the guy that he has played next to for the last 13 games. Look, this is it's something that's going to make a massive difference with the noise that you're going to face at Camp Randall Stadium. You need those nonverbal cues. You need to be in sync, and I think Runyon brings that. I think Runyon's a big upgrade from Ryan Hayes. Not to say that Ryan Hayes played poorly over the first 2 weeks. Definitely a much stronger debut than follow-up in the Army game. But I do think that Runyon's rock solid over at left tackle, all Big Ten last year, and really someone that you can run behind if you do turn to the ground and pound game that they kind of fell into the trap against Army with. But you do have to throw the ball in this game. And I think Runyon's a big pass protection upgrade.
So those are our picks for the weekend. The big noon kickoff on Saturday at Camp Randall. Again, we will be there. I will be there. Daniel will be holding down the fort from A2. So make sure you stay tuned to the WolverineLounge.com for all the coverage of Saturday's game, as well as all other things leading up to the day. For Hail to the Podcast, this is Daniel Dash and Brandon Justice. And always remember, if you hail to the victors,
You will hail to the podcast.
I'll see you guys next Friday.